Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and for this episode I'm joined by guitarist Chris Allard and pianist Ross Stanley. Their album Tortugas came out in the summer, and I'm delighted to be able to chat to them about the album. And what you're listening to right now is Use Your Imagination from Tortugas. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Ross and Chris. Hi.
Hi there.
Tell me how you and Chris first met.
We're very old mates, actually. So we met at Guildhall. We were both in the same year. And we started I think it was the year 2000 on the undergrad course. Since then, we lived together for a bit. And I've been in various bands of Chris's for many years, and we've basically played together ever since.
And do you sometimes find yourselves kind of surprisingly on the same gig?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the beauty of the jazz scene. You never know quite who's going to be in the band sometimes.
That was a little snippet of my conversation with Ross just before Chris joined us, and this is now starting the conversation properly. Thanks, Chris and Ross, Chris Allard, Ross Stanley, for joining me for Harmonious World. Your album Tortugas is out now, and I want to know a little bit more about it. And I started talking to Ross before we started officially this about the track Tortugas. You said it sounded a bit like a tortoise. Is that right?
There's not much of a story behind that other than that it just seemed a little bit tortoisey somehow, and I was struggling to find the title. And Tortugas is tortoise in Spanish, or turtle, and somehow it ended up being Tortugas.
There you go. Why was then that the title for the album? Just because it's an interesting word or something?
Yeah, well, it was partly because it was partly on account of the cover, actually, which you can see, which can be seen online, which is these rocks. I took this picture when I was walking in the Peak District near Edale, on the hills. There's a mountain called Kinder Scout, and there were these rocks there that I thought looked really sort of interesting, and that picture, the rock somehow looks a bit tortoisey.
It does, yeah.
We'd sort of set on that as a cover, and then and we're trying to decide what to call the album, and then ended up fixing on that.
Yeah, well, it all ties together, doesn't it?
It seemed to tie together somehow.
Yeah. Ross was telling me that you met at Guildhall 20 years ago.
That's right, and actually, it's even more. It was the autumn of
22 years ago.
22 years ago, very close to close to the day, because it was the beginning of the autumn at Guildhall. We were in the same year all the way through, and played together very often ever since. And when we finished college, we moved into a shared kind of jazz house. With a number of other jazz musicians, some of whom I'm sure you would know, and ended up playing all the time. It was very good music training.
It's amazing how many of these jazz houses there are, aren't there? There's always where 4 or 5 jazz musicians are gathered together. There will be crazy times.
Absolutely, yeah. This place, there were 2 different places where you could rehearse. So quite often there'd be 2 simultaneous rehearsals going on throughout pretty much every day, and into the night. So it was quite a productive kind of time musically.
Yeah.
Most of it, anyway.
Yeah, but there was possibly liver damage involved.
Yeah, and much curry eaten, I'm sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something about those jazz houses that there's always a recycling bin full of bottles and a bin full of takeaway containers.
That sums it up
Yeah.
in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about this album. So what made you decide that you were going to record some original tracks and some classics?
We played together quite a bit in various different kinds of ensembles, and then but we've always played duo. In fact, I think the first time we ever played a gig together was a duo gig, and it's always just had this nice vibe. It's very easy to, I guess, because Ross is so incredibly good. He makes it easy for me to play with him. But it's always, we've always just had this kind of affinity in that, and we talked about recording a duo record. And in fact, on one of my albums that Ross played on, which was a quintet, we put in one duo track, and that was in 2009 that was recorded. Open Spaces. We talked about doing a whole duo album for some time, and then during the one of the windows in the first COVID kind of lockdown, the opportunity presented itself, and there's a friend of mine who's an excellent producer who has this fantastic studio near me, and he recorded it for us beautifully at his place. That's Mike Trim. And so, yeah, it all came together, which has been a really gratifying thing.
Well, much like Chris says, it was really the opportunity kind of presented itself in terms of the studio space, which was a bit of a, I mean, we've been, as Chris said, we've been talking about it for many years, but often these things just end up being pub talk, if you like. Oh, we must do that, we must do this, and then it never happens. But so,
it did.
Yeah, I think that was just a catalyst. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
No, it's just incredibly easy. It seemed to work the first time we ever tried playing duo, because often the combination of guitar and piano can be tricky, and sometimes doesn't work depending on the players. It seemed to just fit in this case.
Very good. So how did you go about choosing which tracks to include?
Well, I mean, Chris is more of a prolific composer than me, so we had to really include a number of his originals, and then really it was sort of augmented by just some of my favourite tunes to play. Really,
Ross brought along some of his arrangements of some very nice tunes. Also, Use Your Imagination I particularly like, which Ross arranged, and it changes key in interesting ways, and then has a really nice ending. But in fact, you'll hear a lot more of Ross's composition coming up, I'm sure, because he definitely seems to be getting into it now. There's a new tune that we've played a couple of times, which is Ashford Days, which is a fantastic tune, which I'm sure is going to be recorded soon, if it hasn't been already. Has it, Ross?
it has, yes.
Ah,
Yes.
fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing that.
Is that a solo piano piece, Ashford Days?
It was, yeah, that was the original intention, although I recently recorded it with a saxophonist called Trish Clues.
Okay.
But yes, but to date, really, I've only composed a handful of things, unlike Chris, who's got an entire portfolio of original music.
Well, thanks, Ross. Tell you what, though, Ashford Days, I heard its inaugural performance, which was at the duo concert with Ross and Trish Clues at the Wigmore Hall. So it doesn't get a lot more posh than that for a first gig.
Absolutely. That sounds brilliant. So where can people hear you play some of these tracks live?
Well, I am planning to get some gigs for us as a duo There's a couple of possible things in the offing, but nothing is fixed as yet. It can be heard on all of the streaming platforms online, and there are actually an extremely limited number of physical copies of this, which aren't available anywhere other than through me or Ross, in fact. So if anybody's interested in having a physical CD copy of it, they could contact me. My website is chris@chrisallard.co.uk, or it's available at all the streaming platforms. And in fact, if anybody's interested to hear us playing this live, if they keep an eye on my website, I'll keep that updated.
Brilliant.
Regards to that.
Fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, Ross, good luck with your session today that you're driving to.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you very much, Hilary, and it's been lovely speaking to you.
Yeah, you too, and I'll hopefully get to one of your gigs at some point. I'll keep an eye on the website.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thanks so much.
Well, we definitely had some technical issues there, but it was great to chat with Ross and Chris. What you're listening to now is Tortugas, the title track from their album. And please do check them out online, and hopefully we can all get to see them live at some point. This is a lovely album. I really enjoy this duo of guitar and piano. There's some real complexity of rhythms and melodies. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode, and please do rate, review, share, etc. And I really hope we can all make this world a little more harmonious. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.